Between 1890 and 1914, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities in Canada faced many challenges as government policies increasingly restricted their rights and freedoms. The Canadian government sought to control Indigenous peoples through laws and policies that affected their land, education, and daily lives. One major issue was the classification of First Nations individuals as wards of the state. A ward of the state is someone who is considered legally dependent on the government for their care and protection. This status meant that First Nations people were not treated as independent citizens, but rather as people under government control. The Indian Act gave the government authority over many aspects of their lives, including movement, governance, and land ownership. Indian agents were government officials assigned to oversee and regulate life on reserves. They had the power to enforce government policies, approve or deny travel passes, and control resources. This system limited the autonomy of First Nations communities and made it difficult for them to make decisions without government approval. Another major issue was the expropriation of reserve land. What this means is the government took land from reserves to build railways, roads, and public works projects, often without consent or proper compensation. This loss of land made it harder for Indigenous communities to sustain their traditional ways of life and maintain economic independence. During this period, the number of residential schools for First Nations and Métis children increased. These schools, run by churches and funded by the government, aimed to assimilate Indigenous children into Euro-Canadian culture. Children were taken from their families, forbidden from speaking their languages, and forced to adopt new customs. Many suffered neglect and abuse, and the effects of these schools continued to impact Indigenous communities today. These policies and actions had lasting effects on First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. Families were separated, cultures were threatened, and economic independence was undermined. However, Indigenous peoples resisted these policies in many ways, working to preserve their traditions and fight for their rights. The history of this period reminds us of the challenges they faced and the resilience they demonstrated in the face of adversity.